All right, you probably got the little message. And I'm also admitting some people in. So hello to the person that just entered. We just are getting started. Welcome to Let's Talk About Bruno, a conversation with an uptown Doctorcito. It's Thursday, February 10th, 2022. I'm Stephanie. We have a lot of different worlds converging here tonight. So my writing comic world, Stephanie Nina Pizzarillos. But if you're my public health or parent, PTA world, Stephanie Pizzarillos Boquín. Either way, it's great to see you. So I'm going to introduce Cyrus. He's going to start us off for the discussion part. Just a reminder that it's open mic. You don't have to stay on mute. We want this fluid. If it becomes like a chorus, we'll probably say, okay, guys, we probably need to go on mute, but I think we have a pretty cozy number right now. So just be yourself. And also time is fluid. I know it's listed at ending at 9, but if we're still into it, we'll go over. If you gotta leave, you gotta leave. Don't feel bad about that, but we're just gonna roll with it. That being said, what is free without a commercial? And what is a movie without a movie trailer? We are going to hear a word from our sponsor, Zine100. My backers will get a chuckle. I'm sure you've seen this already.
In a world where outreach programs colonize your culture and community, there's Zine100. Zine100 is a public health zine with tips on taking money and programming from funders without compromising culture and community. The campaign has reward tiers and bundles, including a webinar that can help you get the most out of partnerships. It works on a buddy system. You support a zine, and one goes out free to a group who could put it to good use. Back this project into life. Pledge by the morning of February 17th. Buddy up for public health. Zine100 on Kickstarter.
All right, that was the movie trailer. If you guys don't know what a Kickstarter is, it's just another type of Indiegogo, but I think everyone here probably does. So yes, that is our sponsor, and we end the campaign on February 17th. So thank you. I know I have a few backers here. All that being said, let's introduce Cyrus. So Cyrus Demir Boquín is a first-generation Persian Honduran American, aka the Iran-Contra Kid. He is faculty at Columbia University, where for over the past 15 years, he's practiced primary care in Quisqueya Heights, aka Uptown Manhattan, where he also serves as the medical director to the Cosmo Clinic, a medical student-run clinic for the undocumented and uninsured. Cyrus practices social narrative and liberation medicine and will be applying his background, cariño, and critical eye in literature as a Russian literature major at Harvard to the conversation. He's also a pretty swell husband and a loving dad to 3 girls, but don't tell him I said that. That being said, Cy, if you want to take the floor. I don't know if you guys can see Cyrus' face as he talks with me screen sharing. So if you can't, I'll definitely stop sharing the screen, Cy, if you want to share slides on your own. So you want to talk and see if your face pops up for folks?
All right, yeah. Are we doing stuff?
Can you see your face, guys? Are you cool with me doing? Yeah, Mary? Okay. All right, so you do your thing. You guide me on slides.
So cool. Some of you here have met me or know me, some by rumor or other words. So that's my introduction. Obviously, where we come from, our backgrounds, professional, personal, ancestral, are going to affect a lot of the way we hear a story, right? See a story, interpret it. So yeah, my mom is from Shiraz, Iran, dad from Honduras. They both left their homelands before the revolution of Iran, before the current crisis of caravanas and exodus from Honduras. My parents left in the late 60s to land here in the United States. I'm bringing that. I'm also bringing that as Stephanie was saying, as a New York physician caring for largely immigrant communities and daily processing the traumas of migration and those stories in my daily practice. So the survival narrative of how does one deal with migration, displacement is a key one that I see all day and something in Encanto I really wanted to talk about and get other people's feedback on. But for those who haven't seen the movie, and just to quickly summarize with a few literary injections, I wanted to recast, all right, in a summary for a few minutes, and then we'll get into the conversation. So in my mind, Encanto is a Disney fairy tale, right? Taking place almost entirely within a magical casita, set in Colombia, and visually within this western Valle de Corcora, right, in the central Cordillera of the Andes. Although taking many parts throughout the various diverse cultures and geographies of Colombia. And it is focused on the 3 generations of the amazing Madrigal family. Okay, the town itself is basically un encanto, right? And it appears as a word, encanto, you know, the most common way I hear it is the La Isla del Encanto of Puerto Rico, right? The island of enchantment. But encanto as a charm, as a place of wonder, is what it's called in this story, an enchantment. And if we look at the story, it's really founded about 50 years ago in the immediate traumatic aftershocks of displacement when Abuela Alma, and remember Alma means soul, and Abuelo Pedro, and in Colombia, Pedro, there's a saint, the famous city and municipality, San Pedro de los Milagros, you know, the Peter of the Miracles, remember, which they are fleeing violence, unspecified who, why, when, but they flee violence and with their newborn triplets and cannot escape. Don Pedro turns around and is lost. And that's all that's said. He's lost, he fades away, a candle takes his place, and so is the miracle, right? This candle appears with the miracle given to this family, containing a magical flame, right? And it is Alma's need to keep this flame going, because it can never go. And as she claims, it can never go out, right? The candle provides the miracle a refuge in which the family can live, and the others who followed this pair could form a new home, a place of wonder, an encanto. And then the miracle grew. The casita then came alive that this candle bore, providing shelter. And at that point, this miracle candle, whenever a child comes of age, it becomes blessed with a magical gift, the magical realism that defines the entire movie and this house. That magical gift is meant to help us, the family. And their children, once they gave birth, they too will be gifted these things. And together, these families' gifts have made this house a paradise. And it is understood that these gifts will only be given if those who accept them honor it and share it to strengthen the community that is built around the Casa Madrigal. You know, we hear of this in the initial scene with Abuela telling Mirabel, the granddaughter, on her day when she's supposed to get her gift. Now, Mirabel means wondrous, in its core, and she is waiting to get this gift so she can make her family proud. A constant theme of the demand of the children and the next generations to make the family proud, to defend the house, the family tradition, and the community that is depending upon this magical family to keep them safe and stable. After that, the movie pans out to Encanto, and then we start with the incredible songs of this film. The first one being the La Casa Madrigal, the family Madrigal, that details the lineage of all the family members. The two, Alma and Pedro, their 3 twins with Tia Pepa and Bruno and Julieta, the mother of Mirabel, each with their secret powers. And we hear about them in this song that the kids are asking, yeah, but what about you, Mirabel? What about you? Ultimately, by the end of science, she gets the embarrassment and the necessity to admit, oh, I didn't get a gift, right? And that's the burden that she bears. But one other thing that as we see the movie develop, and as she's detailing the gifts of the others, well, what gift does Abuela get? I mean, and this I'll open to the fact, what gift does Abuela have? I mean, in the song, she runs the show, right? She's the matriarch. She is perhaps, her gift is being the recipient of the miracle in the candle. She doesn't really have a superpower like all the rest of the generations, in truth. But anyway.
But she has the power of, you do what I say. It's the magical abuela power, right? The matriarch.
Yeah. It's the mythic one, but we kind of forget that. And even today I was looking, I was like, wait a second, everybody gives except Mirabel. Poor Mirabel, she doesn't have any gifts. I'm like, wait a second, abuela, well, she's the recipient of the gift, but she can't lift up 5 donkeys and cure, you know, all disease with the arepa con queso, or like hear everything miles away, which is another, in terms of linguistics, of Dolores is the one with the magical hearing, right? And I thought that was really beautiful. Dolores means pains, right? And so the burden of hearing, super hearing, the secrets of the family and everything, it is a painful thing to bear for Dolores. But fundamentally for tonight's thing but let's talk about Bruno. Bruno, with the steel showing song of We Don't Talk About Bruno, becomes this fascinating figure, right? His power was clairvoyance, the ability to see and forecast things in the future that nobody can, you know, almost like a prophet. And however, when that magical day when Mirabel was waiting to get her power and it didn't appear, we hear that Bruno, with his ability to forecast and see, was asked for the family to try and resolve this wonder. Why does finally some family member not receive a gift? Well, he gets this vision that says the foundations of the family that everybody's been so dependent on are crumbling and will fall. And Mirabel is a part of that story, but we're unclear on her role. Is she the cause of it? Is she the savior? We don't know. And as a result, the inability for Bruno to forecast this and the guilt of having seen this, he disappears, right? And from that day on, he's kind of the outcast, the black sheep, and we don't talk about him. He essentially gets disowned. A fascinating aspect and a great song. From that on, we then go almost Indiana Jones search type for where's Bruno, finding the revelations of the shards to try and figure out this story. And then in Mirabel's quest to try and understand her role and to finally wait for that miracle. Wait, what is my gift? What can I do to this family? How do I make it proud? Is there anything I can do that'll make me good enough for Abuela? Is there anything any of us can do to keep this miracle of her survival, her trauma of widowhood, and the responsibility they bear to care for all of the community of Encanto? That's what we see the rest of this story, and as spoilers, that somehow gets resolved with her hugging it out with her perfect haired and flowered Isabella sister. And then the two figures, Mirabel and Alma, coming together in an understanding that they are their own miracles and gifts, each other, the two without this potential super gifts, who are there to save the foundation of the family by allowing it to crumble, but then rebuilding it, in truth, with the help of the community. Because after this magic casita fell, the community came back together, and though they were not magically empowered, they were many, and they brought whatever powers and gifts and skills they had, and the house was built only then for a candle that had gone out to reignite and to provide this magically realist house casita that is equally a figure in this movie, to give life to this story of survival. and family primero dependence. So that's my brief retelling. In our discussion, I guess at least 2 or 3 points I want to get your conversation on particularly is this idea of displacement. In their case, I'm assuming they did not leave complete nation states here as a forced migration, refugee, but Disney and this setting is very non-historical. I mean, we have no modern evidence. There's no cell phones here. There's no evidence even of electricity so much here. I mean, this is almost what time frame to set Encanto in is tough to know. There's no radio or even, not even sure if I saw any like old, oh, there's a gramophone. There's a gramophone image of the mice coming through, but that's about the, otherwise, it's meant to be that timeless fairy tale setting. So how does one deal with that sense of immigrant, forced migration, and the intergenerational trauma and responsibility that places on families, the children, the grandchildren who are trying to make up and honor what their ancestors gave up and went through in order for them to be alive and thrive and survive. And then we'll get to a little Disney and how Disney doing this product can affect that. Because remember, this is Disney. They're trying to make as grossly marketable, profitable, and universal story as they can, and not represent the totality of what Colombia is, what Afro-Latinidad is, what our culture, music, costuming, artisanía, all that stuff. No.
So Cyrus, if I can interrupt, because you're focusing on Colombia now, I don't know, is it now a good time for me to give you a question that one of the registrants have, or did you want to break stuff down still? Because it is related to what you just said.
Yeah, I'll
hold
let
off.
me finish one thing and then we'll do that.
Okay.
All right. And then the last part, because this is Let's Talk About Bruno, is I'd love to get people's ideas because Bruno is such a captivating figure. The song is so big, is that we all have Brunos, in Latino families and all families. the outcasts, the one we don't talk about, the one we cut out of the family pictures and never gets invited except by accident to family events. And as that song has gotten so big, like, what does Bruno represent for you guys? Because I think people can bring and forecast a lot onto that figure and that song. And I think it's a fun thing to talk about. But yeah, so now getting back to the picture of the question that was specifically asked about this case. So Stephanie, do you want to read it or?
Oh, all right. Do you want me to answer your question about Bruno?
No, because we'll get to those as we go. But let's
because I got questions.
I think Bruno will save for Bruno because that's the big one.
Okay, we'll save Bruno. So someone from Brooklyn, I won't give name unless you're here and you want to say, hey, that's my question. Why do you think the movie avoids contextualizing the violence and displacement in the film, even though it tries so hard to say it's based in Colombia?
Yeah, I mean, in full disclosure, like Encanto, I don't really follow a lot of the movies or stuff, and I'm always suspicious of Disney. I loved Coco, but like I didn't even know about Encanto, and I saw some random ad or something, and I was like, oh, cool. It looks like, I'm guessing it's got to be Latino, and it's Disney. But otherwise, I went to watching it having no idea what it was about. I didn't know Lin-Manuel Miranda was involved. I didn't know it was about Colombia. But as I'm watching it, and I see this initial scene, which at that point I'm getting a hint it's Colombia from certain signs, but like not yet. I was like, oh wow, look at this. But then with the disappearance of Pedro in the river, I mean, for me, half Honduran, that's triggering Caravana and other things for me. So and all kind of other traumas historically in Latin America on rivers and stuff. But I think there's a very conscious choice of, because it's Disney, because of, focusing on that explicit trauma is not is not the point. Like I remember the Bambi scene, And I was traumatized when I was a little kid seeing Bambi's mom and thinking that was a little more explicit in the violence of how she got taken. But like, you know, he just hands up and then fades away. I think it's a clear, you know, it's a kids. They don't want this to be a focal point. He was lost. That's it. You know, and even the whole lost and perdido and disappeared in Colombia and in many other places, that carries a whole other meaning. And of the millions of people in Colombia that were displaced over 50 years of civil conflict, I mean, it's a huge moment that you would think might get very specific referencing maybe later on in the story, some accountability but I think they've purposefully avoided placing unique historical context, in part because they want it more universal and less tied into a blame game, which is super complicated within the Colombian context of political violence and displacement.
Yes, I think, yeah, it's Disney is the short answer. I think you nailed that.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it triggers in the modern age, where some of the most incredible periods of violent refugee and displacement of peoples throughout the world. You know, it's a very potent statement for the movie to open and carry throughout this tale.
Do you want some more questions, or?
What was there? Was specific other ones? Yeah, just to throw out, because then I want to, yeah, just get people's.
No, I didn't get any more for registrants, but I have some questions ready for you if you want to, or if anyone live has some questions so far or wants to chime in. Carrie, yeah. Oh, Carrie, we're just talking, so no need to raise your hand or anything. We're being very chill.
Hi, Cyrus.
Hey, what's up?
I guess I had a question because it actually came up today. I was thinking a lot about generational trauma. Mm-hmm. So one is the emotional conditioning of that component of generational trauma. That's like learned conditioning that family members teach their young people through generation. So that's one component that makes a lot of sense to me. You know, you're afraid of a dog as a parent, so then you teach your child to be afraid of a dog, you know, from something very simple like that. And then a child now is afraid of a dog. But even if it's migration and being afraid of learning what to be afraid of and teaching that to someone. So I get that kind of experience and trauma and how generations learn that. What about biology from like the brain component? So I don't know if you've ever done that or learned about generational trauma. And then do you think that there's parts of Encanto that talks about generational trauma that is that deep? Because I haven't thought about that. Like, I can see what you're saying, but are there hints of it throughout the movie that you can see? And then this other thing too is I listened to someone do a whole presentation about Disney one time, like through social work. And I do think that Disney's changed over the last 10 years. I'm going to just say that broadly, 10 years, but I'm not quite sure. And one interesting was like, you know, in the Disney one that was the first African-American princess, Tatiana, she was the only princess that ever worked. And so that is a play, you know, that talks about, injustice in that kind of way, that she's the only princess that ever worked. And then when you look at Mulan, with the stereotypes of Asian people and Asian men, Mulan is a girl that becomes a man. And so the masculinity component of that. And so it's just interesting that, and then I think that was a generation of Disney. And now seems like a different change actually with Coco and some other ones within the last 10 years. So also that other separate question about Disney too.
Yeah. So on the first one, I mean, within medicine and talk, there's certainly the idea of inherited intergenerational trauma. You get to this whole field of epitopic genetics. And so besides our genetic component in, the helix, there's certain proteins and epitopes that get added on, and during times of stress or deprivation, these are literally encoded and can be handed down to the next generation and generations after it. And it's very clearly seen in certain contexts of ancestors who were in the great famines in their countries at certain times, that period of deprivation has significant effects on their epigenomic inheritance that they will then provide to the next generation that can have
famine.
additional
That's
risk
right. I'm reading
factors
about that. Okay.
for like, so we have elucidated some of that already as as a means of molecularly handing down trauma in a genetic format. I think the inheritance of intergenerational trauma, I'm sure perhaps generations from now we'll have clearer ideas how that's encoded and carried on and transmitted genetically. But I think clearly through just the nurturing and behavior, we see that, and anybody who talks to and takes the time to really get to know their ancestors, you'll see that it comes on. But certainly the codes of silence or performance are very well seen in Encanto, right? I mean, when she discovers the shards and because she went to Bruno's lair to put together, and then her dad walks in and is like, what? How you get that secret? Be like, you don't tell anybody. Oh, we're not going to tell anybody. Pretend everything's good, And then Dolores, though, they see her in the doorway and she's like, I heard everything. I know everything. I'm going to spill the beans. But you have that, and the whole song. I mean, look, they created a whole song to carry on this through the no, we don't talk about him. Like, we learned he was our brother. He disappeared. All right, now we're not talking about him. Don't talk about him. What happened to Tio Bruno? We don't really know. Nobody talks about it. So those codes of silencing or, performance, keep doing your strength tests, keep making your flowers, make sure you marry the right guy that's going to help the community, strengthen the community. You have your role in the family, and that's to make the family proud and keep our foundation there. I mean, this goes in so many cultures across so many times, but Encanto does a really good job of sort of bringing that up, and how when you build a house on a shaky foundation in some ways like that, there's dangers to it. And eventually the truth comes out and the cracks are going to make their appearance in that facade, right? I mean, now Disney's, in my view, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to tell my girls, I have 3 little girls, and we've seen all these movies come out, and I'm like, this was not around when I was growing up. And that idea of representation, the idea you could just, I mean, the amount of stuff in terms of Colombian art and, just clothing and the stuff in the house that you could sit, and now that I've watched a number of times, it's really fascinating. And, they had a whole Colombian cultural trust to really try and get it right on representing so many different varieties and regions and cultures of Colombia. And I applaud them for it. I was like, yo, this is, now some people might hate on some of that because it's like, wait, they're from this one region geographically. Why do you got pottery from here? Or why do you got mochila, indigenous stuff from another place? Or why are they wearing, the panchos ruanas from here when Mirabel is wearing a standard outfit of Santander, whereas Dolores is wearing stuff palanquera? But like, I think they were trying to make an honest attempt that we can't represent all of Colombia, but we'd love to show a massive part of this incredible country of diversity and things. And for that, I'm like, it's great. And I know when I was coming to terms with my own Latino identity, like Carlos Vives and Vallenato, when that was hitting 20 years ago, when Carlos Vives' voice came on, I was like, what? Really early. And when they finally showed the name Colombia in like 5 minutes into the film, I was like, oh, wow. Because I didn't know what I was getting into, and I was impressed and enjoyed it. And it's a very effective, enjoyable film in my view. But what do other people think on that intergenerational trauma, how we teach it and other stuff? Because we got people from a lot of different cultures, and a number of my colleagues who've been treating this in the clinic and in our communities online here, and it's everywhere.
I just want to mention, like, Carlos Vives, this is not really about trauma. This is about Carlos Vives. He has really had a musical exploration, and he's really out there to celebrate Colombia, all the different facets of culture, and varieties of ethnicities within Colombia. And he's really like had projects, musical projects on doing that. And so, you know, I think that was in part, you know, that there was an attempt there, right, in a Disney way, but without the specifics, right? But I actually, when I heard Carlos Vives, I also was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I was like, Disney has him. This is great.
Yeah.
And in that sense, there was a celebration of quite a variety within this family. And, you know, if you want to talk about variety within, we've got all sorts of different cultures that, if we think about celebrating all sorts of cultures, but we also take Bruno as if we're talking about certain cultures that the mainstream is not in agreement or in accordance with, and they become don't talk about Bruno kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many different like metaphors that you can make between celebrating culture and yet hiding other cultures, right? And that are not being in, you know, this mainstream celebration, right?
Oh, for sure.
I mean, I was taken, for talking intergenerational trauma, by how each family member carried the burden differently, right? If you have in the family the one that does it all, that has to, you know, lift the burden, the task maker. You have the one that has to be perfect, right? Perfect appearances. You know, and I think that plays out in real life, right? We all carry our burdens differently. So I was really struck by how they illustrated that with each character, and still somehow made it for kids, even though as adults we're like, wow, that's a big weight they have. But Sai, if I can get you to talk a little bit about Mirabel, right? A character that stirs up the past uninvited, snoops where it's not wanted, or consent, you can say, is given. And I say this as, who has the right to tell these stories, right? What does Mirabel have agency? Does her inheritance permit her to do this? And I say this as a writer who interweaves family stories in her fiction with consent, but always questions that. And I've had to sit through like AWP panels where people talk about mining family history. And in some extreme cases, families so horrified that this would out or reveal something. You know, one extreme example were that they were Holocaust survivors. And authors get applauded for it, like, wow, that's so great, you brought the story out. But I'm like, but these people are devastated. So, you know, what about Mirabel? Did she have that right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the Madrigal family, in terms of the characters, really, although Bruno is his own, but otherwise is an extremely, you know, matriarchal, and the women dominate the film outside of Bruno's, you know, mythic position. So at one point, I think part of that agency and her charge of family history and burden is that she bears the stigma and weight of being the one Madrigal without the gift. She's and once she's othered and outsided by that, you know, her gift being, well, maybe your gift's being in denial, which was a great line in that movie that the little girl said. But if her gift is supposedly be in denial, well, the great awakening is one of revelation and uncovering the real family secret of Bruno and the salvation of the family. But yeah, I mean, you have this young girl who's struggling, and you can imagine she starts admitting it, that her great song of waiting for a miracle. I mean, here she is on her day waiting to get her superpower, and then it doesn't happen. I mean, how traumatic is that for that little girl? And yet she has to carry on and accept, as everybody said, don't worry, you're as special as everybody else is. That's all right. I mean, it's an incredible burden for her to carry. And even today when I was looking at it, you know, the portrait wall with Abuela is her and the next figure in front of their wall on their gift day. and Mirabel doesn't get that because her door disappears when she doesn't get her gift. You know, and then they reinforce that, her invisibility, when they're taking the family portrait, and they're like, yeah, come everybody in. When, you know, Antonio gets his speaking with the animals ability, and then, you know, she's not included because it's like, you know, she's invisible. She's the other, she's gone. And so I think this is the charge, the great hero journey she has to take to get authenticity. You know, in some ways, she's a figurative, you know, bastard child almost. Is she truly Madrigal? I mean, a defining element of your entry into this family is superhero. Everybody has one. So maybe she's illegitimate on, you know, on some level. But it's an interesting narrative device that you have this one young woman who's now in charge of proving her extraordinariness in a family of extraordinary. And her father is almost like, you know, look, I know it's tough. I mean, look at us guys who marry into these women and we're nothing. It's a hard burden to be ordinary amidst the extraordinary. It is a storytelling device to craft it, because she is the guiding figure here outside, along with the casita, of crafting the story of the Madrigals and their future. And, you know, and it's a nice device where Bruno is like, yo, I don't know what you're supposed to do. You want me to tell you your role, tell you your path? I don't know. You're there. You got to figure that out. But you know, I'm getting to like Mirabel more as I watch it again and try and see her develop through this struggle, because, you know, like at the beginning, she's putting on this pretense, telling everybody how amazing her family is, and not even, oh, I don't want to be autobiographical here. It's not, you know, because the shame of saying, I don't know, I don't have an ability. I'm doing whatever I can. And everybody's like, don't try so hard on the day, getting everything ready for the decorations and stuff. And she's cutting out all the stuff and trying to be, you know, and she's getting in the way. And people, when Abuela is like, you know, some people, they just need to step aside and let the stars of the show run it. I mean, that's a harsh thing to hear from the matriarch, to be like, this ain't your show. Step in the back. I think I answered. But yeah, I mean, did people get struck by this question of intergenerational trauma when they were watching this thing? Because for me, it was very quickly you know, this idea of how many children of immigrants feel this overwhelming burden to be perfect and to do honor to their family and to not shame the family, in part because they know, even when it's not spoken, what the people before them gave up in leaving their homelands or being forced away, or be surviving horrific trauma, the Holocaust or genocide, or, you know, domestic violence, or any other situations that lead to migration, economic, like, instability or gang violence or whatever it is.
From my perspective, not being a first or second generation immigrant, but I did not see the trauma as that driving force, but the power itself, in that the power that allowed Abuela to survive, to survive that trauma, to get them out, to survive the immigration or the displacement, is what she established as so important to this family. And that represented, like in our world, might be the perfect, needing to be perfect, the kids needing to be held to a higher standard, that sort of thing. But it's interesting that I didn't see it as the event, as that she kept looking back on as the trauma, but as the power, the overcoming of the trauma. And I think that's what the narrative was trying to do as well, was to start with, this is a story of triumph. This is what she's told at the beginning. And then you find out the horrors behind that later on. So I think I was fooled by it. I was fooled by the actual narrative.
Oh, and I think,
following it that way.
you know, there's so much joy, and the artistry and the computer animation is so amazing that it's, you know, this is part of the tricks of Disney, is that, you know, I mean, again, when I saw Pedro go down, I'm like, damn it, another dad getting killed right off the bat. I'm like, come on, guys. Like, can we not kill the mommies and daddies? Like, Walt Disney had a horrible family and hated his, you know, so he left all these comic characters without parents or families wandering through the pages.
No, they got to get rid of the parents. There's
Yeah, I mean,
that's the one thing they do decide to keep. They're keeping with that.
Right, that hasn't changed, Carrie, in the 10 years. Like, that's very
things,
consistent. You got to take out the parents.
They don't change.
Like, let these kids start their own future. The future is all about.
well, I did take my mom to see Ponyo, which is a telling of the Little Mermaid, and in that the mother just leaves her child alone while she goes off to work, and my mother was so horrified by that. And I said, "Mom, you don't understand. They let the parents live. This is a mercy."
She at least coming back at the end of the workday. That's true. Disney wouldn't even be mentioned.
That's right.
No, but and what you're saying, because as I watched it again, and the end scene where you have finally in Abuela's desire to find Mirabel again, who's left because she's so guilty, the house is crumbled. Is this my fault? I'm gone. Like, no, I didn't save the miracle. Mm-hmm. You know, I was supposed to save the miracle. I was supposed to make the family proud. And she's gone to have Abuela then visit that river of her loss. Yes, where the miracle was born, but also where her husband was taken from her, is a powerful thing. And that's where, in terms of the suffering and the trauma, that when I was rewatching it, you know, in the two figures of Mirabel and Alma talking, you know, as they're admitting and hopefully saving the movie, and the big epiphanies of where grandmother is saying, no, you're the miracle, but then Mirabel very much looking at her say, like, no, you suffered so much, and you were all alone, and you know, we were saved because of you, and we're a family because of you. And you know, reflecting back to Abuela when she knows it was me who broke the house, she's like, no, like, your suffering and what you have gone and borne through, all of us, is what gave us our whole foundation. So yeah, I mean, when I'm watching it second times, thinking more about this, it becomes, I think, a deeper thing for me, at least when I was watching. But again, remember, I didn't know what this thing was about, and I'm seeing a man and a family crossing the river and dying, and I'm just thinking about my Northern Triangle, Central American and Mexican families recently who are all dying in their transfer. I have no idea what Encanto was. We're going to be in the middle of Colombia, and like the Vallenato is going to start pretty soon. Like, I'm like, oh, okay, wait, I gotta get trained, and then once we don't talk about Bruno hit, I'm like, whoa, this is a jam. Like, and I'm not thinking about that.
It's funny, Cyrus, when you're talking about like that sort of epiphany, that sort of like aha moment that Maribel like sort of understands the grandmother past the superficial, like, ella manda todo, you know, like she's in control of everything. Yeah. And that up to that point, that's kind of like Maribel just understands her as the controlling person who mandates, you know, how
and
things
judges.
are done, right? but that's where there's this connection, this aha, like she understands actually where maybe some of Abuela's, you know, reasoning and rationales behind things that she does come from. But when I'm thinking about real life, I think that's oftentimes where we don't see those ahas come, where you have one generation that has some type of experience and they're moving in some way, whether it's geographically and emotionally, they're trying to move from that experience and do something better for their kids, but their kids never have that aha. Like, they never actually have that moment that we see in Disney, which is so like, yeah, they understand it. But I see oftentimes between different generations, first, second, third, or even fourth, right, where there isn't that understanding. And then you see a lot of that familial issues where that generational trauma doesn't get resolved, it doesn't get better, it maybe gets worse. You know, like there's not sort of this movement towards better when it comes to trauma specifically. It becomes almost like a cycle instead of an improvement towards betterment, where I love that, you know, they reconstruct their foundation and they become a better family, really. And that's where generational trauma gets hooked, gets held back maybe in real life, is that there isn't that foundational change in real life. In real life, it really takes a lot of instruments, a lot of teamwork and help to get a family to reconstruct their foundation.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I mean, that's, and I'd like to hear other people's thoughts on this, because like for me, like the ending, I was like, okay, here we're in Disney. The Mirabel and Abuela have resolved their stuff. They're seeing eye to eye. And okay, we're rebuilding the house. Oh, but the casita's magical again? The casita's, it's got its groove back and it can dance and do everything. I was like, yo, I wanted that casita. You know, it's like, you know,
Yeah, besides, it has new foundations. It has
no, I know, but part of me is like, you know, like there's some great activist Mexican anarchist posters where they're like, God didn't make the world, the bricklayers did, you know. and part of me was like, wow, here you had this mutual aid community in this time of loss, build this house, coming together, doing whatever contributions they could to build up a new foundation for Encanto and the village. Do we really need the magic realist house to be alive? Or have we already made a new form of magic here with community and honoring people as they are, whether or not they have some superpowers, whether or not the next generation is going to be born with the X-ray vision or like, you know, infinite song or something. Like maybe we have an opportunity to craft a new world, you know, like without that magic power of the candle necessarily. There's a new magic power. So I can't, because yeah, like I didn't buy it as much, you know, like in Coco, where all of a sudden they let Coco, you know, like they let him play music, become the musician and not have to go into the craft of shoemaking. Like, I don't know, I thought that was a little more believable because but in some ways they're just they're reconnecting with their ancestral craft of music making versus their current cobblers. But like this one, I didn't necessarily buy it. I mean, it was nice to see a good resolution because I was really so sad for Mirabel. Like it was like, damn, the house went down and she thinks it's her fault. That's horrible. Like she's just born too much. She don't have a gift and now the house goes down and people are gonna blame her. Like she didn't save it. The flame went out. Like, but I didn't really find that. That was Disney to me, and I would have liked a more radical ending for me. But like,
looks like what the grandma's gonna throw a chancleta at her. Like what more realistic?
That would have been funny. Actually,
I mean, because she talked pretty bad to her grandma, you know, in terms of real life, but it couldn't be any other way. It couldn't be any other way.
But I mean, in terms of intergenerational trauma and stuff, I mean, we see it all the time, and it's like, you know, Crystal's saying, I mean, most of the time, Abuela is not going to come eye to eye, you know, and a lot of times the parents aren't. It's like, listen, I worked in a gas station all my life. I ran the bodega all my life. You need to be a lawyer. Like, I'm not trying to have you go and get a degree in fine arts. Like, I've given up, like, been working 7 days a week and left home and traumatized, or I'm raising, you know, you kids all alone. Like, you need to do something to guarantee that we're moving forward and going to have our Encanto, our magical house. Like, I want a house in the suburbs. Like, I raised you in the Heights. Now I want to, you know, those are more the realistic stuff. But again, that also depends on what you go to stories for. I mean, if it's escapism and the beautiful fairy tale myth, and I mean, Disney's always great at that. But like, I like.
But they had to end aside with being blessed. Like, and that's how I think of it at the end. Like at the end of it, which I cannot stand that phrase when people are like, I'm blessed. But at the end, it had to end with they are blessed. You know what I mean? Like they couldn't be regular people. We had to be blessed at the ending, you know, and that's.
But they,
But, you know, in other ways, that's just a way of being grateful. You know, I mean, you could take it as blessed and very religious.
Yeah,
you know.
but that's where, like, for me, like that line when the family, when the community came and were like, we don't have much, but we are many, and they gifted like bricks or they gifted whatever. I loved that, because to me that was like, wow, that's community, and that's its own form of magic, and that's
but you have to be blessed. I mean, I don't think it's
that
just,
is being blessed to me. That's bendición.
like
That's blessing.
People,
Like,
It can be
people have to be
intentional.
special. You know what I mean? Like, there's something about people can't just be regular people. You know what I mean? That like,
no, yeah,
have
it's
to be-
Disney,
and
and
that's
it's
where
the
it's like,
amazing
yeah, it's
Madrigals.
Disney.
But
That's
I felt that, I mean, it was, and it's such an interesting conversation. I
It's
really
super
appreciate it.
powerful.
I don't know if you can hear me okay. What I was struck by was that they're transformed, you know, and I came to the movie like you, Cyrus, not knowing anything about it. Honestly, I didn't know. And so I loved this movie, and I was so enthralled, and it was so moving by the end. It was just such it was like an emotional experience going through the movie. And I thought, there were so many brilliant aspects. I'm really enjoying the conversation, but I mean, just thinking about the transformation that happens at the end with Isabel as an example. Yes, she still has power, but she's completely transformed. You know, the fact that, I mean, to me, and I'm not a first generation or second generation immigrant, but those themes to me just were so powerful, of these children who have to bear that, burden, as we've been talking about, but to find out and to have it shown so powerfully that they're so unhappy with it. Isabel's so unhappy being perfect, and so unhappy being, have to always make the flowers this way. And then suddenly she's angry and makes this crazy thing, and then understands this new power. So that's what I really was struck by that at the end.
I like that,
like breaking free.
The plot device when I was watching it that first time, and they're like, hug it out. I'm like, what the hell is this? Why does Mirabel have to hug Isabella? What's this? This is some foolishness. Where are we going with this? But then when she broke down, and to show that, like, wait, I'm not just some pretty, Colombian Barbie doll thing here. I got my own burdens. I got my own suffering too.
I thought it was very powerful. I mean, just that sort of breaking free. So I liked the fairy tale, even if it's fairy tale compared to real life. I liked the fairy tale story of that sort of being able to break free, essentially, and be be your own individual person. And it's so interesting, you mentioned magical realism. I was so, I didn't know if that was the right way to look at this. I was so enthralled by how I was just watching. I was trying to figure out what was going on, like you said in the beginning, where exactly, what happened to the father, but it struck me as, I mean, I was so swept away by the magic. And I thought this was one of the best, certainly, Disney movies, I mean, I've seen in a long time. I haven't seen a lot of them, honestly, but from Coco, again, so moving, so beautiful, such a beautiful story. It just seemed, I was absolutely amazed by Coco and this, and I agree with some earlier comments that something seems to be changing, because I don't tend to like Disney movies that much.
No, but I'll say, but Coco makes me cry. I mean, I cry with Coco. Like
me too. This was making me cry. I really teared up at this.
It got me at a few points, but I was just having such a ball with this one that usually the trauma stuff that evoked was not enough to make me think. But yeah, I mean, magic. If you're going to tell a story in Colombia, you kind of have to reference magic realism and Garcia Marquez. Gabriel Garcia Marquez is the dominant figure of Colombian narrative and fiction.
Beautiful.
And yeah, I mean, I think it was a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I finally sat down and read, 100 Years of Solitude again. And similar to this with this multi-generational family, 100 Years of Solitude, there's a family tree at the back or the front that you always are kind of constantly referencing to figure out all the dynamics and the name and stuff. And I kind of felt like I wanted a family tree put up of La Casa Madrigal, so I could be figuring out the stuff, and are they going to intersect like in Garcia Marquez, like with, you know, but like, yeah. And I, you know, like in modern migration NIFs, one thing that I wanted us to talk to is like the butterfly, and now the Oscar award nominated song is not, you know, don't talk about Bruno. We don't talk about Bruno, which I don't know why they would nominate that, but like,
I heard they didn't submit it.
No, they didn't even submit it. They went with Dos Oruguitas, the two caterpillars, which is interesting to me. I mean, I applaud like Lin-Manuel for writing in Spanish fully and doing the song, and it's a very, very nice song. I like Dos Oruguitas, but like, it was fascinating when we talk about Disney and like politics and apolitical stuff, when he was discussing Dos Oruguitas in his like recognition of his award, you know, the caterpillars and butterfly. Well, within magical realism, one of the most clear symbols of that in the movie, in the fiction and in that book, are the yellow butterflies that always appear around one figure in 100 Years of Solitude. And so it's a standard fixture of magic realist imagery, and one of hope, of symbolizing hope and love. And so when those make the appearances, when Abuelo, you know, Alma and Pedro are on the light posts looking at each other, and then at the end where it becomes such a dominant figure surrounding, and then Bruno's vision is like, go follow the butterfly. So there is a very clear, you know, tribute to Garcia Marquez and to magic realism within this structure. Obviously, the house that can do everything on its own is the biggest characterization of magical realism. But like, for me, I'm like, the butterfly in modern American narrative is one of a symbol of migration. Yes, of transformation and miracles, because when Lin-Manuel was asked about the song, he's like, well, yeah, I mean, the transformation, metamorphosis of caterpillar to butterfly is nature's most amazing miracle. And that's why I chose that narrative. And I'm like, all right, I'm not going to argue with that. It is an incredible idea of transformation that we still don't understand, you know, genetically and molecularly, how this mush in the chrysalis ends up becoming transformed into a butterfly, and forming a new house of the chrysalis and breaking through that, you know, walls in order to fly off. And then it's a fascinating metaphor, but like, when you talk about displacement and migration, the butterfly and that, you know, classically in our North American context of the monarch that comes annually on its migration from north to Mexico, I mean, in his acceptance, he made no mention of the butterfly as a migratory animal, and how sin fronteras, nature doesn't abide or respect and is endangered with the permanence of borders and walls and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, Disney and Lin-Manuel, who often will try and avoid politics for just by personality or by market share, I was really struck by that. And I loved seeing the butterfly, but to me, looking at what that symbol means, and then you'll see it in the very first beginnings. Mirabel, if you look at her classic Santandera dress, it's bordered with butterflies, and the kitchen wall tiles are butterflies encoded into things. So it is a massive symbol to represent Garcia Marquez, but also I would think of migration and transformation. And
I think it invalidates that metaphor of migration and immigration. Absolutely. To not recognize, or to not to
yeah, because the majority of the Latinos who are watching this film, when they see butterfly, we're not necessarily reflecting on Garcia Marquez and Gabo's like butterflies. We're being like, yo, sin fronteras, man. That's our people, and that's our magical transformation, and you know, that's our beauty, you know.
So any other thoughts before we let you guys leave? I definitely want to share some articles before we do.
I was just wondering.
Sure, go ahead.
I mean, Patrick and then Alex,
Sure.
does that sound good? Okay.
Oh, well, I was just wondering, has the Disney Corporation ever flirted as much with communism as they have with this movie?
I mean, they've certainly struck against it and stuff. You know, like I really recommend if you this book, How to Read Donald Duck by Ariel Dorfman, the Chilean, like is a fascinating look at the comic books of Disney in the 50s, which were pure propaganda, anti-communism, like ripping stuff. Like, but like I'm trying to think at the many mythologies within Disney where you could think about like collective action and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking.
Disney's always been very, very much about the individual.
I mean, it certainly is about the individual. Yeah, and like
and
Uncle Scrooge, and I love the DuckTales when I was young, but like, man, you can't get more hyper capitalist like.
Oh yeah.
Than that, but I'm thinking about the Seven Dwarves, other stuff. Is there any communist?
I mean, like Pinocchio is very pro-union, but otherwise, I mean, what the Seven Dwarves is like a worker co-op. I guess?
That's what I'm trying to think. But I haven't seen that in so long that I'm like, Pinocchio, but Pinocchio with the child labor of you know, like just shuttling these kids off and turn them into mules, liquoring them up and yeah, but you know, but what's interesting on Encanto too is this whole idea, like, and again, you can't talk about everything, but like, where's the government? I mean, you have this family who came, set up this enchanted village. There's no governmental controls, you know, like here, Abuela's worried everything's going to fall down. And it's like the priest comes by, but like there's no, you know, mayor, there's no government. Abuela runs the town, you know, like. Yeah,
it's kind of a Disney castle quality.
Yeah,
they end up with what? Like, this is the largest number of Disney princesses in one movie.
Yeah, they're the royalty of the town. They're the queen, I guess, right? Queens of the town, just by nature that they have these special powers, and they become commoners at the end.
Alex, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, going along with that comment, I wonder if Cyrus, your observation earlier that the ending felt vague to you. And also, even earlier than that, that the trauma, that the displacement was very vague. I wonder if those two ideas are connected, in that if we don't know what their relationship is to their community, is this their new friends? Is this their old friends that came with us? Have they set themselves up above their new friends or their old friends? You know, are they in but not of the world type thing? And then are they lowering their status? Are they raising their status? Are they finally becoming one with the new community? Because we don't know any of those things, they can't answer, and then we can't get that kind of satisfactory.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to look really closely in my second, third viewings of this, and you know, like Alma, she says like, we can't lose our house again. Which is a powerful statement. And I was like, again. So she's, you know, so we don't know where the first house was. Was it in a full-fledged community? Did that violence that came, you know, violence visited us, you know, like, and we couldn't get away from it. Well, usually there's a cause for that, you know, whether it's corrupt government, whether it's invading power, whether it's imperialism, whether paramilitaries and us. We have no idea the cause of that. We have no reflection, a pointing finger of blame, and, you know, a return of that threat. I mean, they're in an enchanted village that seems like in a complete bubble. You know, and even when Mirabel asks Bruno, why didn't you leave? And, you know, he jokes, well, you know, those mountains are pretty high surrounding Encanto. But, you know, I just say kitchen adjacent because, you know, free food and good entertainment. These are in some ways, again, it's being a fairy tale. We're going to put ourselves in this bubble of this self-enclosed village that, you know, hey, the house will provide everything. We don't need, you know, they're, you know, you see crops and other stuff, but it's like, who knows where they get it? You know, like these guys were in the house the whole time. A couple times for the party, people delivered supplies, but it doesn't seem like anybody's like, no, the chores were the mythical Luisa helping people reset foundations and carry burros everywhere, but like, who's going to buy the food from the plaza? You know, like, are we butchering anything here, or do we have a full, like, where's all this food coming from? I mean, but it's a fairy tale. The daily grind isn't the topic. You know, it's a great song, and these guys got superpowers anyway. So.
I thought, you know, I didn't do any reading about Encanto, but like just going back, and I'm just like looking now about this Colombian trust that they have, just the changes, you know, within the last, you know, I think the last 10 years that Disney's, you know, focused on, I just think is an interesting component too. Like I did remember hearing about when Coco came, the writers were white. And so they made a huge point to make sure that they had a lot of Mexican representation in trying to afford that movie. And they knew that that was going to be a concern, and making sure. So it's just way different than a lot of these the ones that people, when they think of Disney, are used to. And so the changes that have been made in the last 10 years. And so it's just an interesting component too, the movies that we have now versus what we had, like, you know, even from Little Mermaid and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, as a foodie, you know, and a shout out to Uptown, check out Salento, which is the new Colombian bakery right near the hospital. And the village of Encanto is really based, and of the 3 sites that they visited in Colombia, the one city of Salento in this valley is the centerpiece of what La Casa Madrigal and the surrounding area was based upon. They went to Salento, you know, it was only a 2-week trip, but still, they did a 2-week trip visit and visit a traditional, like, free Black community, the Palenque over there. They went to Bogota and Barichara, which is a more central northern part, but like they did a lot of research. And as somebody who loves a lot of artisania and art craft, and I'm familiar with some of it in Colombia, I was like really impressed when I saw some of the design work and the detail and the computer illustration on it. I was like, wow, like the guayaberas, I love guayaberas, and Colombia has their own style and beautiful ones. And the hats, I'm a big hat like wearer and collector, and so I was just like, oh, this is some cool style that they were rocking. And I applaud them for it. They need to do that, because, you know, so often these businesses will get it wrong. Like when Nike was trying to do a cool Puerto Rican shoe and their Air Force Dunks, and then they put a clear Panamanian symbol on it. It's like, come on, guys, like, like you can't get that wrong. Like you can't just slap on any Latino symbol and think people aren't going to notice it. You got to get it right. Do your homework. If you're not going to have them involved directly, then you got to get them on as consultants and as quality control. And I thought they did a really good job on a lot of that. But that's what I'd love to see. And I've been trying to ask my Colombian friends to be like, yo, is this on point? Like, you're going to sign it like Pat? And she was like, wow. And she, you know, there's things that instantly she saw that like evoke this nostalgia and homeland that were really like, for me, the tall, super tall palm trees, I don't recognize that as the national symbol tree of Colombia. But like Pat instantly was like, yeah, I mean, once I saw that screen and those palm trees, you know, just takes me back. And I was like, yo, what about the little kid drinking coffee at 5 years old? What's up with that? She's like, I started drinking at 5 years old. That's what we do in Colombia. And I'm like, what? Like, and so little things that really hit solid reflection. And that's what representation matters when we're talking about an institution that's been so horrible on. I mean, you get the old comics, and I bought a few of them, and what they do to like Middle Eastern and like and Asian population is just so comically in horrifying ways racist, that it's nice to see him finally start hitting right. You know, I just hope we get more narratives and other stuff. Like, I'd love to see a follow-up, see what the family does now in their new casita. Like, and now that people can follow their own path, what's Isabella gonna do? You know, Mirabel, what's she doing as she grows up? You know, I'm interested. I want to see what goes on. What, maybe the next generation we get some new talent, you know, or not, and how do they deal with that? You know, when Alma is no longer with us, who's taking over? You know, the matriarchy. I think there's room. I think there's room for a sequel.
So I'm just mindful that it's 9:15. We can still keep talking, but I do want to share these slides in case anyone has to go, the remaining slides. Oops, I did not mean. So first, I wanted to remind people that this chat is not in any way affiliated with Cyrus's employer. I meant to say that in the beginning, nor Disney. And all images shown are their copyright. So that was the first thing. And if any of you want to explore some of the things that we were talking about, if you haven't seen some articles, BuzzFeed, the Mary Sue USA Today, there was actually a really interesting one on Latinx spaces that came out, I think, yesterday. You could screenshot this. I could email this to you guys. Just, you know, tell me.
Yeah, that was interesting because she's coming from a Afro-Colombian perspective of somebody who saw like this character of Dolores and her hairstyle and her behavior and was like, wow, I finally saw myself on the screen, you know, and it was a powerful moment for her.
Also, we talked about a lot of heavy subjects, so reminding you of some mental health resources besides your own private insurance for those. And if you live in New York City, there is your NYC Well connection to free confidential crisis counseling, mental health and substance misuse support, phone number and text. And if this was too quick for you and you need me to follow up, I'm more than happy to email. And National CDC, if you're not in New York, again, I can send this to you, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, or maybe this is helpful to someone that you know, and they also have a text line as well. And I think, yeah, those were my last shots. But yeah, I don't want to interrupt the conversation, but I want to be mindful in case people did have to go, because I think I did advertise it. I meant to say 9:30, but you know, we're, I'm sure, tired, but if people want to hang, people want to hang. But thank you so much. I will put in the chat. See, I'm not good at, I mean, I am good at promotion, but like
super IT. I got no skills.
That's all right. To remind you that we did this in connection to Zine100. Thank you to my backers. It's a community benefit zine. The campaign ends February 17th, and basically it provides some really simple tips for groups on how they can work more harmoniously with their funders. And it comes from my over 15 years in the public health world doing outreach, and also partnering with the I Love My Hood collective, who will be doing an illustrated, professionally printed version. And they do a lot of wonderful art uptown work here in New York City. I will shout out also Patrick Lugo. Patrick, if you could drop your Kickstarter in the link. Patrick's also an illustrator who's doing a page variant for Zine100. And Patrick has a really cool Kickstarter that was like funded in hours, but we're getting those stretch goals, right? Patrick, if you have kids that, Patrick, why don't you pitch your, but I did order one for a school library. If you want to tell us a little bit about Tiger's Tail. And I welcome anybody who has anything creative out there that wants to chime in. But Patrick, tell us, Tiger's Tail, pitch us.
Oh, perfect for the young martial artist of any age. It's a kung fu fantasy. Think of the Jungle Book, learning kung fu, except it's all about non-violent de-escalation rather than it is about fight scenes. It's born out of 20 plus years of hanging out with ultra high level martial artists and Taoist philosophers and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of little what you call it? Lessons, moral tales, but without the punchlines, so that, you know, the kid can ask the parents or the kung fu teacher and everyone can talk about it.
And if people are not familiar with Kickstarter, he has a lot of cool rewards, meaning you don't just get the book, but like I signed up for, like, he could draw me as, like, I don't even know what you're going to draw me as, but like you could get some vanity art.
Kung fu. It's all martial arts themed. But
all right, I'm gonna be some warrior. That's all I know.
Yeah, kung fu hero. But I think the main lesson I'm trying to impart is that kung fu doesn't mean fighting. Kung fu means, you know, acquiring great skill in a particular thing. So it's fun. There's art.
It's art. There's a lot of stuff. Yes, and it's a great campaign. But thank you guys for coming. I hope you had fun. I mean, if people want to stay, but I think we're I see the thumbs like, yeah, good night. But it means a lot. Sai, did you want to end on anything?
No, just, keep looking out for good narratives, share them. We need more within all communities. Our story should be told. And so write your own to tell your own story and represent those who you're about well, it's what we should all do. I was a Russian literature man. I love reading to this day, and it's essential to all healing. So keep it up, and yeah, I find Encanto gets better with every time you watch it. We're gonna be watching it a lot more.
Yeah.
So
and dancing. I like dancing to the songs. Anyway,
yeah,
thank you
some
so
cool
much.
dance moves in there. There's
Yeah,
some dance
come
moves
on,
in
you got to
there.
do that cha-cha. We don't talk about Bruno. All right, guys, have a great night. Be safe.
Peace.